Um, Welcome to this week's discussion about Parshat Mishpatim. A very important and timely guest with us today is the CEO of National Council for Jewish Women for NCJW, Sheila Katz. Sheila, you, first of all, just one of my greatest friends in the entire world, and one of the most sophisticated and I think important political Jewish leader strategists that we have today. So thank you for your willingness to lend your voice.
I'm so happy to be here with you, Adam. This is fun because you just said we're really good friends. So I feel like everybody gets a window into our conversation on the Torah portion this week.
I love it. And this week in particular, the invitation to you, because this week is Repro Shabbat. So I don't know if you want to share with some people what Repro Shabbat even is.
Yeah, I'm really excited because it's really becoming known in many ways. About 5 years ago, I started this role about 5.5 years ago, I guess. Wow, time flies. During all the crises we've had in this country since then and abroad. The Torah actually has a part in the Torah portion this week that is the foundation for understanding Judaism's position on reproductive health. And when I started, I heard a lot of people in their advocacy for reproductive rights or, for safety and healthy pregnancies to use the language of Jewish values, which is always great, right? B'Tselem Elohim, we're created in the image of the divine, or Kavod Habriot, dignity. And I actually learned when coming into this role that it actually talks about it in the Torah. And I was like, if it talks about it in the Torah, we should learn about it and then talk about it, because advocacy these days, particularly on issues that have become or are perceived as partisan, when sometimes they shouldn't be perceived that way, it is helpful to have a rooting in faith. And so what we started to do was just say, hey, challenge everyone, teach this section of the Torah portion because nobody's talking about it. There's a lot in here. There's a lot going on, but it seems like people skip over this one. And even in most summaries you'll see of this Torah portion, it's not what people pull from it. We're learning about kashrut laws in this Torah portion, right? There's other things seemingly bigger, but there's just a few sentences in here that actually teach us. If I may, should I just go into it?
Yes, definitely. And
Okay.
also, if there's is there a programmatic thing that people can do to
Oh, yeah.
participate in an NCJW initiative?
Good friends. Thank you. So Repro Shabbat is something anybody can do anywhere. And you can go to NCJW's website to sign up, ncjw.org. You can go to JewsForAbortionAccess.org as well, or Rabbis for Repro. We've got a few ways in. We have 2,500 rabbis of every denomination that are working with us, and we have cantors and Jewish educators. Our goal is not to tell every denomination how they should interpret this Torah portion, and there are some slight differences. Our goal is to ask rabbis to get on the bima and teach this part of the Torah portion in the way that's meaningful for them. So my interpretation could be slightly different than somebody else's, but we all know two Jews, three opinions. And so you can go to your synagogue. Hopefully they're teaching this, and you could tell them you want them to teach this. You can just look at the Torah portion, read it, and engage. We have resources on our websites, downloadable conversation kits. And we also have a way for people to talk about their reproductive journeys as part of this Torah portion, right? So learning about what Judaism says and then opening up a conversation. Are you somebody who's wanted to get pregnant but couldn't, or didn't want to be pregnant but did? For some reason, we don't talk about these things a lot. And so many people in the Jewish community, so many people everywhere experience miscarriages, experience infertility, or are scared about getting pregnant. And so we just want to open that up and take away the taboo. And we also want to take away the stigma associated with abortion care, which is something that a lot of people need in this country and is at risk right now. So everybody can have the conversations with their friends, go to synagogue, and then Lilith magazine actually published, I think this is hilarious, maybe not for everyone, but you do you, everybody, A step-by-step instruction if you'd like to bake a challah in the shape of a uterus. My favorite thing that we do is not only share the good ones, because there's some really good ones, we share the fails. So it's people who attempt to do this and it's really bad. We'll be sharing those on our Instagram.
I love that. It's like a very Brene Brown normalized the shitty first draft of something. Um,
Yeah.
it's also, I mean, as you get into your teaching, one of the things I love that you just said, that is a theme that I've picked up on a number of these parshas, is the way in which the Torah normalizes talking about some of these taboo issues. We might not necessarily agree with what the Torah says or what the law might be, or we're grappling with it, but the fact that it's in there, like I don't know that it was a given that this was going to be in the Torah, but yet, as a written out, there is an example. There's a law about how to react, and so it actually does. It forces us to have the conversation and to grapple with it. So good on you for helping put into the conversation a topic that is taboo and that people might not normally want to talk about.
Well, and the hope is the more we talk about it, the less taboo it is, right? People get pregnant and make decisions around their pregnancies. And so that's what we want to talk about. And Judaism actually offers something different than when people normally think about the concept of abortion and religion. And so it's very important because we are a minority religion in this country and we have religious freedom. And it actually means if we care about protecting religious freedom around the things people traditionally think about, about holidays, about the way we pray, etc. Anytime religious freedom is attacked, we have to speak up. And that is happening right now on the issue of reproductive care, like overwhelmingly all aspects of reproductive care and women's bodily autonomy. And so, but I do love, I will say this, I've been particularly inspired by the fact that we have rabbis of every denomination and I've been learning a lot on some of those slight differences of looking at this, but there's so much everybody has in common of how they interpret this section. And it's really beautiful because sometimes people like to make this seem like it's only people who identify as progressive who will agree with this, and it's only people who would be potentially in the Orthodox community who might disagree, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So there's a lot about this that's just surprising that it's in the Torah that Jews agree. This is one of the most agreed upon issues in according to Pew, which is wild, right? And so I'm just glad we get to talk about it. So we've got close to 3,000 communities who are observing Repro Shabbat. And anybody can also just post on their Instagram or social media in any way. Our goal is to get people to talk about it, not to tell you what to say.
So now this parsha is the one of the most famous, I think, lines in all of Jewish culture. When the Israeli people say "Naseh v'nishma," we will do, and then we will listen and ask questions. Um, you reread the parsha this week to prepare for the conversation. You're getting ready for Repro Shabbat. What's coming up for you? Like, what is a nugget from this week's parsha that is speaking to you, that's inspiring you, that you're going into the Shabbat with?
Yeah. I mean, the Torah portion's been hopping lately. Really some really good some really good things back to back. So to position us, right? We have fled Egypt. Miriam has had her timbrel. We got the Ten Commandments just last week, and now we are kind of wandering and coming up with some rules and some laws. And this Torah portion is just like a list of laws, some that we zoom in on a little bit more, some that raise eyebrows, and some that get hidden in the mix of how many are in here. I definitely want to start by talking about the stuff on reproductive rights, and then maybe we'll talk about slavery and the laws that are in here because it's something I don't like, and I have some thoughts on why they're in here. But my video is not blurry anymore. Okay, so here's the gist. In this Torah portion, Parshat Mishpatim, under the law section, they actually talk about a scenario of two men fighting and a pregnant woman who happens to be there who is hit and she miscarries. And the question is, what happens to the people who were fighting and had this happen? Because we've just learned that it's an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, basically death for death. So do they have to die for a pregnant woman miscarrying as a result of being knocked down in this fight? Right? That's the ultimate question. And there's a few interesting things that come from this, right? The in the Torah it talks about that if the pregnant woman herself dies, then you must actually compensate a life for a life. But if she miscarries, it is not the same thing. And the husband can fine for the person responsible. So right, none of this is perfect because only the men get to make these decisions. Got to fix that. There's a lot of interpretation from here from the rabbis, and this is the section that that defines Judaism approach to reproductive rights, health, and justice. And so at the end of the day, the two messages I think from this that matter most, that we are seeing almost unanimous agreement. There's always a dissenter here and there, but almost unanimous agreement from all of the movements in Jewish life is that the life of the pregnant person is paramount. So if we need to choose at any way, shape, or form to save the pregnant person or to save the fetus, Judaism would tell us to save the pregnant person, that her life is more valuable. It goes on in all of the commentary, which I encourage people to read. There are people who are talking about what it means that at one point the fetus is as if it's a part of her thigh at a certain particular, like it is a part of her body and not something separate. And for the first 40 days or so that it's mere water. There's a lot of conversation about timing and a variety of different things. But at the end of the day, fundamentally, it's saying that a fetus is not a person. It's also not saying that a fetus doesn't matter. And it's very important to say this out loud. That's the second part, because more than 30% of pregnancies lead to miscarriage. And it's very important, particularly as somebody who advocates to have abortion access, to be sensitive to the fact that a lot of people in our communities have miscarriages, and that's not nothing. It's not saying that their pregnancy wasn't anything. It's not saying that that's not emotional and that they should do what they need to do in those moments. But there is a distinction in Judaism between the person who's carrying a fetus versus the fetus itself and the status of personhood. And that leads to all the other commentary from there.
One of the things that comes up for me as you're talking about this, and maybe I'm obsessed with words and language and semantics because of my experience in Jewish learning and Torah learning. But I think that what is powerful as I've been exposed in different ways to maternal health and the journey from conception and pregnancy to, God willing, having a healthy child, but everything that happens in between, is the word abortion applies to certain surgeries or interventions or things that we hear that word and we think terminate pregnancy because of want. But in fact, just the procedures and some of the things that need to happen, some of the interventions to save a mother's life based on whether it's miscarriage or other things that are happening, definitionally we use too broad, maybe it's too broad of a word, but the fact of the matter here is we get so caught up on a word and an interpretation of the application as opposed to what are we really talking about here? What we're talking about is maternal health. We're talking about prenatal care. We're talking about ensuring everything we can do in the things that we have control over to bring healthy people into the world to provide healthy and safe life.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Adam. I think most people know that if there's an abortion ban, it impacts people who don't want to be pregnant, who are pregnant. That we know. And that's really important. There's a lot of on dignity, on well-being, and there are some different interpretations from rabbis on this, right? In the reform movement, it's pretty clear that the mental health and wellness of the pregnant person is paramount even there. And you might hear kind of rabbis on the other end of the spectrum saying, well, is that a life-threatening situation? And so that's where sometimes the small disagreements could come up, but everybody knows if there's an abortion ban in Texas, somebody who actually wants to have is pregnant and doesn't want to be is impacted. What a lot of people haven't made the connection with yet that you're talking about, that's very important as well, is that anybody who wants to be pregnant is impacted. Anybody who can be pregnant and anybody who wants to be pregnant. Because if you have a miscarriage and you don't fully miscarry, which happens quite frequently, you usually go to a hospital and you have what's called a D&C procedure. I'm not interested in necessarily classifying that as an abortion. I think it's very important for people who are having miscarriages and need miscarriage care to have the language that works for themselves. But according to the law, that is the same procedure as an abortion. And so we are seeing example after example after example in states that have banned abortions where somebody needs life-saving medical care because they haven't fully miscarried, being told that they cannot have a D&C procedure because that is considered an abortion. And I mean, I won't go into the details here. I don't know, people are watching and eating or whatever, but literally being told to leave and when they're about to die to come back. And we have now seen multiple deaths of pregnant women as a result of this. So I think even just talking about this, and that's why our conversation is about reproductive journeys broadly, these two sentences in the Torah that undergirds everything that we're talking about here, there's so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about, the misinterpretation of it, the weaponization of religion today, to take away our rights. And I actually think you just hit on something that's so important. If anybody cares about somebody who can become pregnant, then the link is what it means to ensure that every single person can make their own decision, maybe with their rabbi, maybe not, but certainly with their doctor, for their health and their life and their future.
So lesson one, like good on the fact that we read this parsha every year, which means that we're invited, but in some ways forced to have this conversation every year, which is important to reduce the taboo, but also learn how to have a conversation, because the way that I might have had this conversation 5 years ago is very different than the conversation I'm having it today. But lesson number two, with a little bit of our time left, there are other really taboo issues in this parsha that you reference that you might want to talk about. Like, it's in there and it invites the conversation and to grapple with why it's in there, how it's in there. So, as maybe a concluding thought for the week, what else in this parsha in particular are you thoughtful of this week?
Thank you. There's so much in here. There's so much in here. I think the part that feels most alarming to me that I've done a lot of thinking about is actually about what it means that we have laws around treating slaves with care, which feels like it conflicts, right? When someone strikes a slave with a rod and they die, the person who did that has to be punished, right? It doesn't say if they have to be punished for life, which is interesting to think if Judaism would consider a slave in the same status as fully a person. I think, and there's a few examples if they how a slave should be set free, a variety of different things. When I first read this, I was like, why doesn't it just say don't have slaves? We're literally leaving slavery. And it really bothered me, if I'm honest. And I kind of went on a journey and I learned with a bunch of rabbis. And Rabbi Yitz Greenberg opened my eyes a bit in thinking about this among several other things that I dislike in Torah. And he talked to me at one point about how the Torah meets imperfect people and tries to guide us to a better place. And perhaps if the Torah here, he didn't say this exactly, we were talking about something a little different, but this is what I'm taking and applying it here. If the Torah said don't have slaves, perhaps we would have never gotten to a point where, as a people back then, they understood not to do that. But trying to humanize slaves is what pushes people to move in a different direction. This is the case, by the way, that people who believe Judaism is promoting veganism and being vegetarian, it's the same thing they would say about Garden of Eden and what it means that we have kashrut laws meant to cause the least amount of harm to animals. It doesn't say don't kill animals. And some of that's in this Torah portion too. So I think about that. I still don't like it. Let me just be very clear. I would prefer it to say don't have slaves. And I think as I'm trying to make sense of some of the other things that's here in the context of what it was like then, in the context of being slaves ourselves as a people, and then having these strange laws, is that this is being designed to go to people who have work to do to repair our very broken world. And that even the things we're given aren't being given to us with completion. That's like, for people who believe in God, this is the partnership. This is what it means to build a better world, a holy world, a just world, a more complete world, a world where there is not slavery, and a world in which people who have been freed from slaves actually do the work to make sure that other people are not enslaved. And so I hold on to a little of it. If anybody listening has better ideas to make sense of this, I will take it. It is honestly one of my least favorite parts of the whole Torah. So I've got some of my favorites in here, and I've got my least favorites in here. And that's what I think makes this Torah portion so interesting.
I think I can't have scripted a better concluding thought that everything we're learning in this is the Torah provides experience, wisdom, conversation to help us engage in active ways towards redemption, towards a better future, towards a better world, both naming and normalizing the human experience and human reactions, giving very practical ways to try and work forward. So that concluding thought gave me the chills, hearing you as not only the professional and the political strategist that you are, the community organizer that you are, but the friend, and why I love you so much. What a beautiful sentiment to end on. So Sheila, thank you for sharing your Torah with us.
Thank you for having me.
Shabbat Shalom.
Happy Repro Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.